Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss any update from Rouse IAS Study Circle. Join the only official Telegram channel of Rouse IAS Study Circle to get the relevant materials and important updates. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of the newspaper analysis. So today we are going to discuss The Hindu Daily Edition dated 29th October 2021. The news to be discussed has been displayed on the screen and timestamping has been provided in the description section. So in continuation with our series to discuss the prelims questions 2021, today we have taken this question from set A. The question says that with reference to India, Didavana, Kuchaman, Sargol and Khatu are the names of. There are 4 options given, according to which option A is glaciers, B mangrove areas, C Ramsar sites or D saline lakes. Now the answer to this particular question is option D, saline lakes. And this answer can be known from the Prelims Compass 2021 of Rouse IAS, which clearly states in the section of the wetlands in the desert and semi-arid zones that the run of Kutch, salt lakes like Sambar, Pachpadra and Didavana are the wetlands of this part of the country. So if you have seriously gone through the Rouse IAS Prelims Compass, you would have known that Didavana is the saline lake. And if you have known that Didavana is a saline lake, this question was very easily solvable because this mentions Didavana as one of the sites and saline lakes as one of the options. So moving on to our first topic, which is related to the education sector. This topic has appeared on page number 8 and the topic reads, Getting the Focus Back on Early Childhood Education. Now this topic is very important because regularly in newspapers there are several articles which relate to the secondary school education or the higher education, but somehow this topic gets missed. But today's newspaper has covered this topic and that is why it has become important for us. So the context of this topic is that as we know that during the pandemic times, during the lockdown, each and every sector was hit hard. And the same is true with the education sector also. So the context for this topic is also same. The preschool education has suffered a lot during a pandemic lockdown. Now you first need to understand that what do you exactly mean by the preschool education. The preschool is also known as the nursery school or the pre-primary school or the play school. It is an educational establishment or learning space offering the early childhood education to the children before they actually begin the compulsory education at the primary school. So somehow this aims to build the base for the children in order to have progress with the formal education system. Now we will see the syllabus highlights of this topic. This topic falls under the General Studies paper 2 in the subsection of social justice and the micro section of issues relating to the development and management of social sector or services relating to the education part. Now this topic is very much relevant and important from the UPSC examination point of view in prelims and more importantly in mains, because every year there is at least one question which is directly or indirectly related to the education sector or the human resources. So for the sample I have here taken 2 questions, one is from 2016 and the other one from 2020. In 2016 UPSC asked that Professor Amartya Sen has advocated important reforms in the realms of the primary education and the primary healthcare. What are your suggestions to improve their status and performance? Now, the point to be noted here is that question has been asked on the primary education. Then in 2020, a holistic question was asked with reference to the National Education Policy 2020 and the question read that NEP 2020 is in conformity with the Sustainable Development Goal 2030. It intends to restructure and reorient the education system in India. Critically examine this statement. Now in this question, the complete education system, that is from the preschool level to the higher education level, each and every sector of the education is focused. So that is why you can yourself imagine that this year there might be a question on the preschool education as well. Now if you have understood the concept of the preschool education, which is related to the nursery, play or the pre-primary education, you can understand the significance of the early childhood education. The first is that the study suggests that the maximum cognitive development of a child takes place before the age of 5 years. So as you can see here, there are several lobes in our brain. And for different activities, different lobes are active. So during the age of 0 to 5 years, when the child sees number of activities in his or her home or in the nearby areas, he is exposed to the variety of the activities which take place in this world. And because of this, all the lobes of the brain gets active. And the grasping power of the child in that age is very huge. And as we know that the early childhood education takes place before the age of 6 years, so from this we can deduce the importance of the early childhood education, that the maximum cognitive development takes place during this period. And the second is that this is an important step towards achieving the universal and equitable education, and is in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, the goal number 4, which says to ensure the inclusive, equitable, quality education and promote the lifelong learning opportunities for all. But in India, there are certain challenges which early childhood education system face. And we need to be aware about all these challenges, because only then we will be able to think about the solutions which can overcome these challenges. The first is that our Anganwadi centers are overburdened. Now what happens is that those attending the preschool are primarily enrolled in nearly 14 lakh Anganwadi centers spread across the country, where early childhood education continues to suffer from low attendance and poor instruction mechanism. Moreover, these Anganwadi centers also have responsibility to take care about the health, nutrition, women and child health. So what happens is that there are multiple works in which these centers are engaged, and they become overburdened, and as a result the early childhood education gets the backseat. The second biggest challenge is that the early childhood education in India does not get adequate prioritization. In a recent study by the Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, 45% of the 650 plus households surveyed in urban Maharashtra reported that they prioritize their older child's education over the ECEs. So this is a reality in our India. Most of you who belong to the village or have good experience of the village lifestyle, which is characterized by the poverty, hunger, etc. problems. What happens is that circumstances push those families to such a level that they prioritize the education of their older child as compared to their younger child. So this is the reality. The third biggest challenge is the lack of parental engagement. And this is primarily because of two reasons. The first is that in the urban areas, though the parents are aware about the importance of the preschool education, yet because of their busy schedule and the work culture, the MNC culture in which they are involved, they do not give adequate time to their children. And in the rural areas where people do have time but they lack knowledge that what is the importance of engaging with their children, what is the importance of early childhood education. So in both the areas, despite the reasons are different, but India is facing similar outcomes. And as we have discussed that during the early year, around 3 to 6 years of age group, the home environment directly affects the child's mental level. And by your own personal experience, you are well aware about the fact that the families which have a culture of debates and discussions, the children born in those families have a better linguistic skills and linguistic capabilities. So that is how the attitude and the behavior of a child is shaped, and hence lies the importance of the parental engagement. The last challenge is digital divide. Now this challenge has gained very much importance because of the problems which India faced during the pandemic times. The families or the areas which do not have access to devices suffered a lot during the pandemic times, and still if the family is not having the adequate resources, despite having the knowledge and despite having the time, they will not be able to give the early childhood education to their children. So these are the challenges which early childhood education in India face. Now after understanding the challenges, we need to have a way ahead. We need to have some solutions which should be taken in order to provide the early childhood education to our children. The first step is that parents should be made aware and they should be sensitized of the importance of the early childhood education. So that is why internalization of the ECE, it stands for the early childhood education, The point says that internalization of the ECE among parents is very crucial, and for that we need to have regular and continuous awareness and sensitization drives. The second is that there should be a continuous engagement of all the stakeholders involved in this process, that is, the state administration, the schools, teachers, and parents. The third is that you can also have ideas from some good initiatives being taken in state of Maharashtra. There are two projects, one is the e-Pathshala programs and the other is the Akanksha school model. So these examples also become an important case studies which you can quote in your answers, that we can learn some lessons from these projects. The fourth one is the decentralized approach. And as we know that teachers are the first point of responders in case of education and educating the students. So that is why the capacity building of the teachers is must. The focus on multitasking abilities like sports, education, games, art should be given. And the last but not the least is that the households should be empowered, and we need to provide them with the necessary resources and supporting their income to alleviate the threats of food insecurity. Because we know that this is a harsh reality. If a family is not getting the adequate and enough food to eat to live, they will not be able to think about anything else. So we need to be empathetic for them, and therefore the government should come up with certain steps to alleviate their income and remove the threats of food insecurity to have a better, stable and educated future of India. Now summing up the entire topic in brief once again. First we understood the basic meaning of the preschool education, and then we analyzed few previous year mains questions, and we understood that the questions related to the theme of education is very much important from the UPSC examination point of view. Then we understood the significance of the early childhood education, which is related to the cognitive development and the universal and equitable education. We also linked it with the sustainable development goal number 4, which gives us further impetus that why we should move towards providing the universal and equitable education to all. And finally, in detail, we analyze the challenges associated with the childhood education in India and what can be a way ahead, what can be the solutions in order to overcome these challenges and ensure a quality early childhood education in India. So moving on to our next topic, that is India will stress the climate justice at Global Summit, says the Environment Minister. This topic has appeared on page number 1 in relation to recently going to be held COP26 summit. So the context of this news is that Environment Minister Mr. Bhupendra Yadav has said that India will emphasize the climate justice and exhort developed countries to transfer the finance and technology necessary to deal with the fallout of the global warming. So in this topic we will discuss the concept of the climate justice, that what exactly do we mean by climate justice and what are its conceptual dimensions. First of all, we will understand the syllabus. In the prelims section, the UPSC writes the syllabus as general issues on environment, ecology, biodiversity and climate change, with a caution that do not require subject specialization. Always keep these words in mind while preparing your environment syllabus. Similarly, in mains it falls under the General Studies paper 3 under the section of environment and the micro section of conservation, environment pollution and degradation. Now these terminology based concepts are very much important in the prelims examination. For example, in 2016 UPSC asked this question. The term intended nationally determined contributions, that is INDCs, is sometimes seen in the news in the context of. So 4 options were given and you had to select the correct one. So the correct answer for this question was the option B. However, from this question you can have an idea that there can be a questions on the similar lines in relation to the climate justice. That the term climate justice is sometimes seen in news means which of the following, and the 4 options will be given and you have to take the correct answer, but you can only take the correct answer if you know the concept very well. So that is why we will understand the concept of the climate justice. So to understand the concept of the climate justice, first you need to understand that what do you mean by this term, that is justice. So there is no single definition of justice. Justice is a multi-dimensional concept. However, the essence of justice is that it seeks to ensure the equality and equity so that there is no discrimination on the basis of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, etc. things. So basically, it is humane in dimension. Justice is not restricted only to the legal terms, it is also in social terms, political terms, economic terms. So that is why justice is a multidimensional concept and it should not be seen purely in the legal sense. Similarly, the climate justice should not be seen only restricted to the environmental sense. So that is why climate justice insists on a shift from a discourse on greenhouse gases and melting of ice caps into a civil rights movement. That is why it focuses on the people and the communities which are most vulnerable. And as discussed before, that climate justice is a term used to frame the climate change as an ethical and political issue rather than the one that is purely environmental or physical in nature. So that means that there are certain ethical responsibilities and duties which are associated with the whole aspect of the climate change which is going on in the world. And there should be certain political responsibilities as well. For example, you might be aware about the funds which were pledged by the developed countries. That was $100 billion fund. They pledged that they will give this fund to the developing countries every year in order to mitigate and adapt to the climate change, but still that promise has not been fulfilled yet. So the developing countries, for example India, claim that the developed world, for example USA, is running away from their ethical and political responsibilities, and that is why, as the news says, that our environment minister has said that India will stress the climate justice at the global summit. So the idea of the climate justice originates from the fact that the impacts of the climate change will not be borne equally or fairly between the rich and the poor, women and men, older and younger generations, and by different regions also. For example, Namibia, which is often referred to as the driest country south of the Sahara Desert, and is a home to large majority of people who are majorly dependent on agriculture, fishing, forestry, the primary activities, and they do not have high per capita income, their GDP is not very high, they are not technologically very sound. So that country will face the impact of climate change entirely in a different manner which a city, for example, let's say New York, will face. The point is not that Namibia will face more severe impacts of the climate change, but the idea is that if some climatic disasters happen in New York, USA is well equipped to manage those disasters. But if similar scale of disasters happens in Namibia, Namibia is not fully equipped to deal with those disasters. So this disparity should be reduced, and that is the basic essence of the climate justice. And we know that historically marginalized communities such as low income, indigenous communities and communities of different color often face the worst consequences of climate change. In effect, the least responsible for climate change suffer its gravest consequences. And consequently, there has been a growing focus on climate justice, which looks at the climate crisis through a human rights. As we discussed in the beginning, the concept of justice is itself a humane one. It is not only political, it is not just legal, it is not just economic, but it is a multidimensional concept which keeps humans in the center and strives to achieve the equity and equality. And same is the case with the climate justice also. And that is why the climate justice examines the concepts such as equality, human rights, collective rights, and the historical responsibilities of the climate change. Now this term is very important. The historical responsibilities for the climate change. For example, the developing countries like India regularly claim that the developed countries of the Europe and US, for that matter, in the post-industrial revolution era, they have already polluted the environment to a huge extent. So they share the historical responsibilities in order to tackle the climate change. And that is why the concept of common but differentiated responsibilities emerge. Now, if you have understood the concept of climate justice well, then you can yourself think about the ways in which this climate justice can be ensured. There are four major ways to ensure the climate justice. The first is the climate litigations. For example, you go to the judiciary, you go to the courts and you file the PIL, and you witness that on regular basis there are several PILs in India and abroad which are filed in order to ensure the climate justice. So the one way is legal in nature. The second way is to support and strengthen the climate change protests. You might have heard about the Greta Thunberg. So similarly, there are several protests. For example, in India, you might have read about the Chipko Andolan, Epico protests. Then there are several protests going on in the mineral belts of India, for example, in the states of Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, this very region. So the climate change protests are the civil movements which can be very handy in order to ensure the climate justice. The third is the steps taken by the government, that there can be a dedicated judicial or the quasi-judicial bodies which are specialized in dealing with the environment related litigations. For example, in India, the climate justice is ensured by National Green Tribunal. And the last one is the political aspect, that there should be a political cooperation at the national as well as the international level. For example, UNFCCC, the principles of common but differentiated responsibilities, as we discussed above, are nothing but just to ensure the global climate justice. So summing up the entire topic in brief again, we saw the context of this news, that is in relation to the COP26 which is going to be held, and then we analyzed the relevance of this topic from the prelims as well as the mains point of view. We also saw that in previous years there are certain terminology based questions which are asked by the UPSC in preliminary examination. And then in detail we discussed the multidimensional concept of the climate justice, which is not restricted to the environmental domains, but it goes beyond this and touches each and every sphere which affects the human life. And finally we discussed the various ways to ensure the climate justice. So moving on to our next topic, which has appeared on page number 9. The topic reads, should the NDPS Act be amended? This NDPS stands for National Drugs and Psychotropic Substances. So you all might be aware about the recent high profile cases in relation to the drug abuse and drugs peddling. And most of the cases are related to the Bollywood. However, the problem is not restricted to Bollywood, it is much larger than that. But today's article has appeared in the context that the Union Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment has proposed certain changes to some provisions of the NDPS Act 1985. The recommendations have assumed importance in the backdrop of some high-profile drug cases, including the recent arrest of Shah Rukh Khan's son Aryan Khan, as you all are aware, following a raid on a cruise ship by the Narcotics Control Bureau, that is NCB. Now this topic falls under the General Studies paper 3 and the section of security, which deals with the aspect of organized crime, and drug peddling, arms smuggling, human trafficking are the key components of the organized crime. So today we will discuss all the major dimensions which are related to this topic and can be asked in your mains examination. First, we will understand all the legal dimensions associated with it. The first is the constitutional angle, that the national policy on narcotics, drugs and psychotropic substances is based on the directive principles of state policy contained in Article 47, which directs the state to endeavor to bring about prohibition of the consumption except for medicinal purposes. Now there is one exception, that is of medicinal purposes, of intoxicating drugs injurious to health. So that means that the constitution lays down the responsibility on the state to prohibit the consumption of the intoxicating drugs which are injurious to health, with only one exception, that is the medical objectives. Further, there is also an international responsibility on India, because India is signatory to following three important conventions. That is, the first is the United Nations Single Convention on Narcotics Drug 1961. Second is the Convention on the Psychotropic Substances 1971, and the third is the Convention on the Illicit Traffic in Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances 1988. So India is signatory to all these three conventions. This is also important from your prelims point of view, as there can be a question that which of the following conventions India is signatory to. Further, there are three central acts which govern this issue in our country. The first one is the Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940. The other is the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act 1985. And the third is the Prevention of Illicit Traffic in Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act 1988. So, you should be aware about the constitutional angle, the domestic laws, and the international conventions to which India is signatory of. Now we will analyze this article in detail. The point-wise point analysis is presented here in the tabular format. For every point, we will analyze the recommendations made, the benefits which it can give to us, and any concerns associated with it, and what can be our suggestions in order to address this issue holistically. So the first recommendation which has been made is that there should be decriminalization of the possession of the narcotic drugs in smaller quantities for personal purposes. Now this one is important because presently the law does not differentiate between the drug seller and the drug consumer. That is why the concern is that the NDPS Act treats both the drug consumers and the drug suppliers in the same category of convicts. So this recommendation is aimed to benefit in a way that the person using the smaller quantities for personal use will not be bracketed with the persons producing or supplying the narcotic drugs. Because many a times we know that our youth are brainwashed and they are forced to consume the drugs. So that is why we need to differentiate between who is a drug seller and who is a drug consumer. And that is why there was a suggestion that a clear distinction needs to be made between a supplier and a user. The Act currently prescribes the jail for the end user and also the drug supplier or the producer. And the ground for this recommendation is that the user of the drugs in smaller quantities should be treated as patients and not as a convicts. And only by this we can change the course of punishment from retributive to the reformative angle. Now this is very important, keeping in mind the conditions which our youth are facing because of getting into this drug racket either willingly or forcefully. But the point is that they should be reformed, and they can be reformed only if they are treated as patients, not as convicts. But there is one issue. The issue is that presently we lack adequate rehabilitation centers. We lack adequate infrastructure. So that is why it is advised that instead of suggesting the proposals to change the sections of this act for the entire country, we should go on the pilot basis to have a government run rehabilitation centers. And here one very important case study emerges. That was in Iceland. Actually, the situation in Iceland was very severe. It witnessed acute drug abuse among its children and youth, and there the government decided to tackle the issue right from the school level. Now this is important because it is tried and tested in Iceland that when the government decided to tackle the issue right from the school level and provided a community-led approach to treat the drug consumers, there is a drastic fall in drug abuse in Iceland. The next recommendation is that the government needs to thoroughly examine that why and how people are getting addicted to the narcotic drugs, because this is the root cause. If we are not addressing the root cause, we will not be able to tackle the problem. There will only be the cosmetic effects, will only be a reactive approach, but we should be proactive in nature. That is what Iceland did. It adopted a proactive approach starting right from the school level. Similarly, we need to adopt a proactive approach, analyzing that why and how people are getting addicted to the narcotic drugs, because only it will help to curb the growing menace of the drug abuse among the youths. And for this, more funds should be allocated to the National Fund for Control of Drug Abuse for the purpose of rehabilitation. And next important step is, which we can take at our individual levels, that parents must avoid smoking or drinking in front of their children, because the experience shows that the cigarette is an entry point for the young. To graduate from the cigarette to drugs is not difficult if there is access to the drugs. And if children continuously watch their parents consuming alcohol or smoking, there is a higher probability that they will end up in consuming the drugs. And the next recommendation made is, though the selling of the drugs near the premises of the school or universities is banned, still it is advised that teachers should play a proactive role. They must keep an eye on the school surroundings to ascertain whether anyone is selling hookah, pipes, ganja papers, etc. And any such activities must be immediately reported to the police. Because it is very obvious that the drugs sold around the school premises increases the addiction of drugs among children. And practically also it is infeasible for police to search each and every house and check the youngsters whether they are using the drugs or not. The role and support of the teachers, parents and civil society is equally important in creating an enabling environment to address the issue of the drug abuse among the youth. So that is why it is advised that we should have a multi-stakeholder approach. So these were the recommendations, benefits, concerns and the further suggestions which can help you to analyze this topic holistically and also help you to write your answer in your mains examination. In the last now we will cover salient features of the Act. The Act gives the power to the central government that it may constitute the Narcotics, Drug and Psychotropic Substances Consultative Committee. And the role of the committee will be to advise the central government on such matters relating to the administration of this Act as are referred to it by the government. The second important provision is that the central government may constitute a dedicated fund for this purpose, which is to be called as the National Fund for Control of Drugs Abuse. And it is written that the fund shall be used by the central government to meet the expenditure incurred for the following. So there are 6 things given under this Act where the funds can be used. The funds can be used to combat the illicit traffic in narcotic drugs, controlling the abuse of the narcotic drugs, identifying, treating and rehabilitating the addicts. Now this point is very important because the fund can be used for the rehabilitation purposes. The fund can also be used for preventing, that is proactively preventing the drug abuse and educate the public against the drug abuse. Further, as the Constitution mandates, which we discussed in the beginning of this topic, that there is one exception on medical grounds which Article 47 provides. So similarly, this fund can also be used to supply the drugs to the addicts where such supply is a medical necessity. So this means that this fund can be utilized to supply the drugs as well, but for the medical conditions. The next important provision is that the government may constitute special and dedicated courts for the purpose of providing speedy trials of the offences under the NDPS Act. And that special court shall consist of a single judge who shall be appointed by the government with the concurrence of the Chief Justice of the High Court. An important point. So summing up the entire topic in brief, we discussed this topic in the context of recent controversies involving some high-profile drug cases, and then we analyzed the legal dimensions of drugs and psychotropic substances, the constitutional angle, the international conventions, and the domestic laws which are there to prohibit drug abuse. And then we analyzed the point by point of the article, the recommendations made, the benefits therein, associated concerns and the future suggestions, and finally we discussed the present salient features of this Act. So now is the time for question of the day. The question asked in yesterday's DNS was, consider the following statements regarding the UN clause. The statement 1 said, it designates exclusive economic zones as extending up to 200 nautical miles from the baseline. And the second statement says that the contiguous zone is defined as the 12 nautical mile zone beyond the territorial sea. You have to find the correct answer. Both these statements are factually correct. That is why the answer is C. The question of the day for today is, consider the following actions and you have to find that which of the above is or are among the ways to ensure the climate justice. The 4 ways given are climate litigations, climate change protests, dedicated quasi-judicial bodies, and political cooperation at national and international level.